With the Apatosaurus, proper giants were introduced to the park once more. They were now literally the biggest attraction, and visitors could see a glimpse of them already when they entered the park due to their sheer size. There was now so much to see in the park alone. Many of the visitors could spend a proper full day here, despite the park being small in terms of space and number of animals compared to other zoos around the world. But the visitors would often spend more time watching these magnificent dinosaurs and animals compared to regular everyday life animals. But for the next pen in the zoo, a different kind of animal would be introduced. This time, it would be something big, but it would not be a dinosaur. A massive zone had been reserved for a large family of new inhabitants. These new creatures to the park would be the mammoth. Discussion raged on for a long time amongst the scientists if this animal would fit amongst the others, but anyone who gazed their eyes upon the mammoth stood in pure awe. Their sheer size and magnificent tusks were enough to humble anyone. Luckily for the park and its keepers, the mammoth was an overall very peaceful creature. If it were aggressive, it could do some serious damage with its weight and tusks. A rampaging mammoth through a full park would be an utter nightmare. Four of these giants would be introduced to the park. They were quite social creatures, and so it was important to have more than one. Once again, these were the type of creatures that adhered to a certain hierarchy, and with the mammoth, it was more common to have a matriarch at the top, rather than a patriarch. The female tusks were smaller, yet still quite impressive. It would be another complicated ordeal to sedate and transport these creatures to their new home. The sedation had to be done quick. The mammoth could easily topple the jeeps by either stomping on them or flipping them over with their trunk and tusks. They were eventually all sedated carefully and successfully. Their limp bodies were heavy, but it wasn't the heaviest creature in the park, so the helicopters this time had more confidence in the operation. It was quite the sight to behold, seeing the mammoths fly through the air like that. When they arrived in a new pen, they seemed a bit dazed, possibly still from the sedation. As usual, the animals would first go and get some water. This had become a common ritual after waking up from their trip. But the mammoths were a peaceful bunch. There was no order in which they could drink or eat, and one could see that all the animals could get along while respecting their own positions within the group. There was a certain elegance in the way they moved. It was slow, but with purpose, often either to drink, eat, or just explore their new home. The park by now had an incredible pool, and something to offer for anyone. For the children, for the elderly and calm, and for the thrill seekers and daredevils. Visiting the park and seeing all these forgotten wonders of life was exhilarating, incredible, and sometimes even a bit scary. Everyone had their own favorites in the park, yet there were so many more dinosaurs that had to be introduced. Some were wondering if there would be enough space to place them all down, but for the moment, the sky still seemed the limit. The sense of wonder by seeing a dinosaur did not die down. Attractions and creatures that were amongst the first to be showcased in the park were still as big an audience puller as they were in the first weeks. And then a few months went by without any new dinosaurs being introduced. For the moment, the money spenders wanted to get some revenue back to sponsor upcoming projects. After this period was over and some money had been put aside in the bank once more, it was once again time to introduce the audience to some ancient creatures. Since it had been a while, they could afford to start out with something simple, something small. Something like the Dryosaurus, cute and flimsy, but able to melt one's heart just by one look. In a way, their color pattern and stripes were pretty close to that of the Homalocephali. Just like those dinosaurs, the Dryosaurus enjoyed the protection of tall grass to hide in, but they were a bit bigger, making it slightly more difficult. As was common with these tiny critters, they were once again a very social group, often demanding large packs to intermingle to reassure them and not make them all jumpy. The next few pens and zones had already been reserved. There were a few large ones, but there was also one tiny one, which justified the creation and import of these tiny dinosaurs. They would fit right in their own way, while the scientists and money holders would debate on what big attraction would be sent in next. The sedation process was expected to go fine. It had been so with all the other dinosaurs of similar size, except the Pachy. But the Dryosaurs apparently had a bit more up their sleeves than one would think. They were very skittish animals. By the least sense of danger, they would run, pretty much adopting a everyone for themselves kind of mentality. And so when the first of their group got shot by the dart, utter panic broke out and the others scrambled. One of the dinosaurs actually bumped into one of the Jeeps and actually sent it flying. Ranger Phil had just come back from his injury by the Pachy. That guy just cannot get a break. But the transport of the creatures went without any further problems, and after a short break, the park had finally new inhabitants once more. They were moved in during the night, as they were not a high priority for the press per se. But they could see well into the dark. Not as good as a Troodon, obviously, but they had all night to adjust to their new home, and they seemed to like it a lot. A few surely were still scared, with the Rangers coming in to shoot them during the previous evening, but this was quickly forgotten once they had a sip of cool water and a taste of those delicious leaves. And then it was time for something bigger, with a lot more teeth. But there were still plenty of those. It was all but a question, which one would see the light of day?